Okay, so we will call the meeting to order of the Ordinance Review Committee, Chapter 56 zoning for Monday, March 14th. And we'll do a quick roll call. I see we have Amber.
Here.
Kristen.
Here.
Angela.
Here.
And Councilman Falkingham is not able to join us tonight. He is traveling for work. So I motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 14th. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is basic discussion of the residential zoning ordinances. I did want to follow up on, since our last meeting, Anthony had mentioned to us that he was going to compile some information for us that he was going to get from Brian about the most requested variances and conditional use permits. More specifically, anyone who has requested variances for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Unfortunately, the night after our meeting, Anthony had a meeting with the Parks Committee that I believe went for like 2 hours. So, so I think he forgot. And then when I emailed him last week to remind him, he was on vacation already and he's off this week. So, so we will get the information from him hopefully before our next meeting. And if we do get that from him before our next meeting, I'll make sure to distribute it to you all so that we have that information and we can follow up for our next meeting. Additionally, since our last meeting, Amber was gracious enough to post our zoning ordinances in a Google Doc. And if you haven't already, check out the Google Docs for the other committees, specifically the Parks Committee, because the way they are commenting in their Google Doc, I find really useful. And it just makes this process even more transparent. So, so that is something that, Amber, if you don't mind kind of walking us through what those, how we go about making those edits or comments. As I mentioned, I tried to do that. All I successfully did was highlighted something. I didn't realize I didn't actually make a comment. So,
Sandy, if you're able to give me screen sharing
yes, let me
permission, then I'll just pop it open.
figure out how to do that.
I think under participants.
Oh, okay. Yeah, who can share? Panelists who can start sharing. Okay, I think I changed it successfully. So do you have the option?
You
now?
did, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay. So I am sharing my screen with a few tabs open, and let's see, in reference specifically to the parks, what they've done, I just popped that open from the city's website so we could get a look at the way that they are commenting and highlighting.
That was my question. So where did you find it on the website, Amber?
Oh, that's a good question.
I was going to say it is under, so on the City Maplewood homepage, if you go to, it's like in the section under government. And then from there, there's a subsection for the committees, the ordinance review committees. So, yeah, actually, if you go back up to the tab that says government, and then you can see the ordinance review committees about 3/4 of the way down.
Well, for some reason, I can't scroll on this menu. Hold on, I got to move my meeting tools out of the way.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, so back to government. It's a very sensitive new website.
It is, yes.
Okay, I see it. Let me see if I can get my mouse down there. Okay, hold on.
Oh.
Gonna move my meeting tools yet again. All right. And then here, ordinance review committees. And then,
Oh, and I was gonna say mine actually pop up right on the screen.
there we
so-
go. I just needed it, my browser to be a little bit wider.
Okay.
So theirs are posted within their little subsections there.
Yeah. So once we sort of kick this off tonight, I'm gonna have Laura post ours there as well.
Great. So yeah, so here's what Parks and Rec has: a running tally of comments and replies that people are making to each other. So essentially a conversation, although the public does not have edit access to it. So I presume that only the members of the committee do. So for ours, I can see that we're all in it right now. We want to go ahead, I think, and probably there are a couple of modes that we can review this in. We could either do suggesting or editing. It looks like the Parks Board is doing the editing mode, where they could potentially make changes that would then be preserved in the document. If you're in suggesting mode, it's a lot like track changes. So if you highlight something and delete it, it's going to show that Amber suggests that you delete this. And then I can just close that out and say, I don't want to accept that change. Versus if we're in editing mode and we want to make a change, if I delete this word, it is deleted and you don't know who did it. So I would recommend, if we're going to be making any changes to the text, that we do it in suggesting mode. That being said, it doesn't look like Parks and Rec has gotten there yet. It looks like they're really in the mode of making comments that they can each respond to. So for our purposes, that would be this little dialogue here, which shows the comment history. And you can see, since I had comments in my document, my own personal document that I stripped away before I shared this, saved a new version and shared it, you can see the residue of a comment that I had in my own document. But this will capture sort of a history of all of the comments that people make and then either delete or resolve. So that's just something good to be aware of. You don't have to have it open in order to make a comment. To make a comment, you simply need to go to the insert comment box. So it works a lot like Word in that regard. So if I'm highlighting something, it even gives me this little dialogue that says add comment, and I can select it. And you can at somebody if you want to, although I think we probably all want to, be alerted to changes. So I think as long as we're checking the document, we don't need to tag anybody in our comments. But so I simply enter the comment, and then it's shown here to anybody who opens the document. I, as the comment writer, can edit or delete it or link it to another comment or another document if I want to. So I'll just go ahead and delete it since it's just a test. But once a comment is put in, if somebody else is in the document and they select it, they click on it, they can reply to my comment.
Okay.
So then it begins to stack up all of the replies to those comments. So I think that that's what's happened here, where you see somebody made a comment and then all of these people replied to it, and you can expand or shrink that comment thread. So again, I'm going to go delete this. So any questions about that? All right, it is pretty straightforward, but if you've never done it before, I can understand being nervous about it. Jumping in there. It's just different enough from Word that you have to kind of hunt around for all of the functions.
Yeah. I think this is definitely going to start moving us to the next step. And I do know, if anyone is following any of the other committees, that the Parks Committee is close to being done with their work. So that's good news. So in the coming months, obviously with an election coming up next month, we have both of those council members are not running for reelection. So they're going to finish out hopefully pretty quickly, and then and that will be, at some point their changes will be in front of council for the new council after the new members are elected and sworn in at the end of April. So that's good news. The other two committees that are working, I'm not sure where they are in their process, but so, after parks, we still have a long way to go, obviously, because we have a very, very large piece of the puzzle. So, has anyone sort of, gotten to the point after our last meeting where either you have additional questions or comments related to what Anthony brought us, or have you already started making notes? Amber, it sounds like you started making notes in your own copy.
I did, although I haven't moved them over to the shared copy yet. But it was mostly around highlighting definitions and limits and minimums. I think some of those things that you were starting to, when you highlighted, Sandy, about what defines a family. So I was looking more broadly at definitions and prohibitions. So I'm happy to transfer those things over. That probably wouldn't take me too long. But if we wanted to kind of go through this line by line, I could keep my copy open while we're doing that.
I'd say, at this point, from a broader perspective, let's see what everyone else is sort of what they've been working on, and then we'll circle back around to maybe some of your specific ideas, because we may all have kind of the same comments.
Yeah, I'm not sure that my comments that I have changed too much from the first meeting that we had, but regrettably, I wasn't able to make the last one. And I'm not sure if any of those specifics got answered. And I think they're, Amber, along the same lines of what you're asking around definitions, and are the minimum square footages, are those still accurate? Like those sorts of things. So I don't know that I have anything too broad for today. I think most of mine are pretty specific.
Angela, were you able to view the recording of the last meeting?
I am sure I can. I probably just didn't see it. So I will review that.
Okay, that's another, the recordings are not easy to find. Honestly, I find it easier to go to you directly to YouTube and go to the City of Maplewood page on YouTube. And then from there, they're pretty easy to find from there, because it's basically just the the council meetings, the work sessions, and these meetings that are there. So I'm sure they're somewhere on the website. I just haven't figured it out. So Kristen, what about you?
I agree. Yeah, just questioning, like the reasoning behind different limitations in terms of square footage, et cetera, talking about definitions, and just getting more clarity about different purposes of different districts.
It sounded, well, based on what Anthony had told us in our last meeting, a lot of the reasoning behind some of these things is maybe not relevant. Or they were copied over from certain other cities or whatever. So I would say, and some of Anthony's suggestions were to simply remove entire sections. So I think that's definitely something that's on the table. It sounds like he would be supportive of that. And if it's not something that applies to Maplewood, there's no reason for us to keep it. Simplified. He had suggested looking at the City of Maryland Heights as an example. And I'll be honest, when I looked through the City of Maryland Heights, I could it's probably simplified from his perspective, but because I'm coming at it from our perspective, I couldn't make heads or tails of what they were doing either. So Amber, I don't know if you had a different experience. You're more in the thick of zoning right now than I am. So
I had heard that recommendation previously, that the city of Maryland Heights is a good example. I didn't notice significant changes, and maybe that's significant differences, I should say. And maybe that's my sort of lack of understanding of some of the nuances around that. I think maybe the way that they've aggregated things might be different, but there was a lot. It's ordered differently. Did it seem that way to you, Sandy, in terms of like they're sort of lumped? I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat just so we can all have access to it if we want.
Yeah.
So it was hard to do like a one-to-one comparison because it seemed to have like different nesting functions in the way that the code was laid out. So I couldn't put it side by side and navigate it easily.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. That yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. Unless anybody else feels strongly, I don't really want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and completely start from scratch. But I think definitely, simplifying and removing some sections that we don't need. I think the one that he specifically mentioned was kind of the last one that we were all like, do we even have that? That Division 5, the planned residential and office district. I don't think that's one that we even have. So I would say that's probably one that we can throw out there for striking immediately. But
Division 5, that was actually the one where the intent and purpose was very vague. Specifically.
Yeah.
Like sites must have economic and physical potential for high intensity development. So what does that mean?
Right. Yeah. And I don't think we even have space for high intensity development. Certainly, I think we only have, very, very small areas of our community that are empty right now. I can only think of really like one or two plots of land right now, and they're basically the corner of Hanley and Manchester across from Sunnon, and then some of the stuff behind Sunnon that Sunnon already owns. So yeah, and at this point I still, because we're still focused on residential and we've been kind of stuck on the residential, I would say since we now do have the entire everything in the chapter that's on is in the Google Doc, that's all whatever 100 and something pages. I'd say, if anyone, as you're starting to make comments in the Google Doc, go ahead, and if you see something farther down the road that you want to make a comment on, I would just keep right on going. I don't remember specifically where the ADUs are. I think they may be not in the residential section. I think there might be some additional amendments or things like that that might be somewhere in there. But that's, again, I think for me personally, my priority is trying to figure out how do we sort of start thinking about allowing the accessory dwelling units and allowing particularly if the lot size is large enough, You know, how can someone create an additional living space within their own property? I was reading some of the articles and comments about the Webster Groves rezoning attempt and all of that went along with it. And, you know, we know obviously that failed. But some of the comments were very eye-opening and interesting, and a good reminder about, you know, just because we want to see more affordable housing, that zoning doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily going to impact affordable housing, but you know, in the long run, and Amber, I think you mentioned this in an email about how can we improve the affordability without risking someone coming in and you know, creating something that we don't want, which is even less affordable multifamily, you know what I mean? So still a lot to digest, a lot to take apart and put back together.
Sandy, is it your thought that we would, outside of the meetings, do our markup and then devote the meeting time to discussing those comments that we've each brought forward? How are they handling it in parks? Is that the way they're doing it?
Tell you the truth, I don't know. I think that's what they're doing, is that, you know, they are continuing their work in between meetings and, you know, having those sort of conversations, if you will, within the document, so that it's not limited to just the time of the meeting. But certainly, you know, we're 30 minutes into the meeting today, and you know, if anyone, yourself in particular, if you've had, since you've already done a lot of work on this, if there is something, if you wanted to go through and go through some of the specific changes, you know, we're all here. Well, we're almost all here. So, you know, we can certainly do that. Unless we just wanted to talk in more general sense about how this can impact our community and you know, some of the things that we can change, and then sort of take that sort of philosophical conversation and then go back into our breakout and go from there. I'm open.
A lot of my comments are why we should look at these minimums, or what should we recommend here. So I don't know that I have a very specific set of recommendations to make around it. More, I think, conversation starters. And that's why it was so helpful to have Anthony talk to us, to at least give us a framework for how we might approach that, because you know, in looking at things like multiple family occupancy of single dwelling units prohibited, for instance, and looking at that language and just being able to highlight a whole section and say, let's talk about this. Let's review this. And just knowing that we have the flexibility based on our conversation with Anthony to really kind of open that up as wide as we can, I think was really helpful. So I do wonder if maybe there's an opportunity for us in this conversation to maybe come to a little bit of consensus about what our priorities are in this process. And they may not all be the same, but I think kind of understanding the lens that maybe each of us is looking at this through, so that we can be aware as we're reading and making comments of kind of what direction we're trying to push some of these recommendations. May be helpful. I don't know if we have like a mission statement about what we would like to achieve. We know we want to make them more equitable, but I think we can interpret that in a couple of different ways too.
Yeah, I agree, Amber. I think that when I look at things, it's from that lens of inequity. And I'm with you. Like, what is our definition of that? Affordable housing comes to mind a lot. But even like what you just said about multifamilies not being able to live in single resident dwellings. I don't even know that I picked that up in there yet. And so what am I missing? But I think we're on the same page in terms of what kind of lens we're trying to view it through. I think another question that I had, and I'm sorry if Anthony addressed this, but I haven't seen anything come through. I think we had also requested violation information. Is that something that we'll be able to see even in aggregate?
Yeah, so when we talk about violations, there's not that's not really what they consider, like they don't consider violations. It's not like the officers are writing tickets for zoning violations, but what we did ask Anthony to compile for us is the most requested variances, or so if they're constantly getting variances for instance, being too close to the property line, or, setbacks. My garage, for instance, when we tore down our old garage and rebuilt it, we had to get a variance because it was only a foot off of the property line where it was originally built. And so in order to rebuild it exactly how it was, we had to get a variance to be a foot off the property line. So those kinds of things where, what about our community already doesn't fit these guidelines, and getting that information from Anthony, that data of, are we constantly getting variances for being too close to the property line? And that's what he's going to compile, as well as the information about who has been requesting the ADUs. Or sorry, not who, but how often.
Got it. And do we know, will that be broken out? I'm wondering how often variances are requested and how often they're approved versus rejected or denied. So I'm not sure if that'll be included.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be helpful.
let me make a note just to confirm, since he's on vacation and he hasn't pulled this data yet. You know what, I'm noticing, it says it's recording, but it says that we're in a practice session. That might be why we didn't ever see you in the attendees. But it is recording. I guess I don't think there's anybody that's actually trying to attend, but I guess I'll go ahead and click start the webinar. Shoot, let's see if that makes a difference. Click start, attendees can join.
I got some that said it's now broadcasting to all attendees.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's, if anybody was there, they gave up. And we're still, yes, it says we're still recording. All right, apologies, everyone. I'm really bad at this. Oh, okay. So yes, data. And denied. And Angela, I'm sorry, when you were talking about that data of what was approved and what was denied, you were saying, how would you like to, I guess, what's your recommendation as to how we?
Yeah. I think the way I was thinking of it is if Anthony's pulling together the most commonly requested variances, it would be great to know how often they're approved or denied. And it doesn't, more often than not, it doesn't have to be exact numbers. But if there's a trend of, we don't allow for this variance, it'd be great to know and why. I'm also thinking there are some things, and maybe it's because I rented for so long and I just bought our house here, which we rented for like 5 years before I bought it. I don't know that I would know that I am out of like if that I am violating an ordinance without being told that I am. So I think that's again where the violation data, I know you're saying there's not necessarily like a zoning violation, ticket that someone gets written or warning. So that's what I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, where do we help? Because I, as a homeowner here, I might be violating several ordinances within zoning and I don't even know it. Especially when it comes to who's occupying the home or the, apartment or something like that. So
Yeah,
just a thought.
that's definitely, when you think about violations from a perspective of the homeowner or the occupant, you're absolutely right, and unless there's a reason for the city to come in, and like in the case of a rental property, the city comes in and does inspections. So that's when, they may cite the property owner for violations if there are, too many people, or this is where the difference between the zoning and the building codes are going to sort of intermingle, because a lot of those things have more to do with building codes than they do zoning.
Yep.
But if you're a homeowner and you're putting up a shed, or, in my case, building a garage, you would know when you went to get your plan reviewed, or if you went to design and review board. Those are the kinds of things, as you're doing construction, that's usually where you're going to see or find out about being in violation.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that you delineated the two, because I was kind of blurring together building, like the occupancy violations, those sorts of things. So is there a separate commission looking at building codes?
Yeah, that committee is currently, our mayor is running that committee.
Okay, great.
And then we also have one looking at offenses, correct, which would include the occupancy permit requirements. I think
Yeah,
are folded under there.
yeah. And the offenses committee has started their work. They have their Google Doc that they're working on. I don't know if they've made it to the occupancy. Again, they've got a lot to get through as well. So, and they're just plugging their way through that, kind of, I think, in order.
But
So
yeah, Angela, you bring up a really good point, because when I purchased my house, I wasn't aware that my driveway wasn't wide enough until I went to try to go replace it, and discovered that I don't have enough width on my lot where my driveway currently is. And so I was told I could request a variance or put my driveway on the other side of my house. But being able to capture that, even that inquiry of what do I need to do, and being told that I needed to request a variance, which I haven't done yet, because there are always those quagmire projects that you just let become a quagmire because you don't know how to solve them, which is what my driveway continues to be. But how often are people sort of not moving forward with construction projects because we just don't know necessarily how to solve them within the existing code? So yeah, just knowing the volume of inquiry that the city gets about that. And I think that's probably in some respects difficult data to get their hands around, because it may just be about keyword searches and email as much as anything.
mhm. Yeah. And some of those inquiries may simply come over the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's, so certainly having the perspective. When I found out that Anthony was on vacation this week, I asked Michael to follow up with Brian, our housing inspector, whatever, code inspector, whatever you want to call him. Brian's also off, unfortunately, today. So so we were not able to get more information from Brian. But I mean, Brian has been with Maplewood for over 10 years now, probably even longer than that. So I think some of this is just going to come from his own sort of experiential knowledge. But yeah, email, things like that, those are all the kinds of things that if Brian still has that information, that's going to be relevant to us. I will say, to circle back around to kind of what our intent is, or if we have a mission statement per se. I think first and foremost for myself, just coming from the city council perspective, and the idea of just cleaning up the language and, simplifying and making everything much more transparent and user-friendly for everyone in our community. I think that's a priority for me. And then, certainly beyond that, the equity lens and the, how else, what's that sort of next step in making our community more equitable and to, we can't stop gentrification, but can we put the brakes on it? What can we do to continue there's something called naturally occurring affordable housing when you talk about in that realm. NOAH is the acronym, and that naturally occurring affordable housing are the things like those smaller 1 and 2 bedroom homes that have been in our community for a long time, and that may or may not be rental units, or may not have changed hands from generation to generation. And how do we avoid losing that while our community is growing so fast that these developers want to come in and tear down those houses and rebuild very, very large houses on those lots. So so that's kind of my short-term goal with this process.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I think we all sort of are coming at it from that same perspective. It's helpful to have it articulated.
Mm-hmm. So
Right.
Go ahead.
We walk our dog all the time around Maplewood, and so we gotten to like talk to neighbors and stuff, and a lot of times, especially the people who've been here for decades, they said, I want to stay here, I want to remain in Maplewood. I'm nervous about getting priced out, in terms of taxes, etc. So I guess my goal is to make sure the people who are already here are able to continue to stay here if they like, and then people who want to come in are able to do that too. And price does, I don't want them to automatically be priced out of our great city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amber, one of your comments earlier was you had mentioned that you had a section where you thought, we should look at this and let's talk about this. Was there a specific section that you were thinking of when you were referencing that?
Yeah, well, particularly around the maximums and the minimums for things like square footage. So also height and bulk requirements for buildings, and the number of parking spaces required, sort of the lower hanging fruit, I think, when you're looking at how to increase density on a lot. Those are the things that I started looking at first, but just highlighting them because I don't know that, that's a recommendation that you can make without a lot of conversation, particularly with the city around, if we were going to look at, changing square footage minimums or the number of people per square foot that can be allowed to live in a dwelling, or looking at things like adjusting single family zones to be multifamily. Those were the things I was starting to look at first. Just where were we limiting opportunity to use the land flexibly?
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Do you know, does anyone know, like, safety wise, is there a minimum square footage per person that we have, that's needed? In terms of like building codes, et cetera?
That's a good question. I don't know from a safety perspective necessarily.
There may be something within the building codes, again, going back to sort of the, if you think about like from a fire perspective, maximum occupancy, that's where my head is going. So I think there is something, but I don't know how it's calculated, and I don't know, sort of how old that calculation is.
And that's probably, I noticed in the Parks Board that they had cited a couple of other codes of ordinances that they were looking at it nationally that were a good model. I think that's an opportunity for us to see where other municipalities have made those adjustments, just as an example.
Do we know of within like our region or Missouri or nationally, if somebody has reviewed the zoning ordinances in the last couple, 2, 3, 4 years that we could take a look at?
As far, well, and this isn't necessarily zoning specifically, but as far as I know, when we had our kickoff meeting about the ordinance review committees, there's a professor from SLU that joined us, and he mentioned that we are apparently the first city that he's aware of that is going through its ordinances sort of with a fine tooth comb, if you will. So I don't know that there's anyone else that has taken on this project. Now, specifically related to zoning, if we look at newer cities and sort of planned cities, like if you think about Newtown and St. Charles, those kinds of cities were very specifically planned in sort of that urban planning mode. So, so there may be some examples there for sort of best practices when you're starting from scratch and putting a city in the middle of a cornfield.
And then also there's national examples of cities that have radically revised their zoning codes by taking out whole sections, which I don't think is something we want to hazard in this process, but there's certainly examples of that too. And Sandy, I haven't looked a lot at what Webster was proposing at the sort of granular level, but was that about removing the single family designation on a swath of lots?
Yeah, I think they were, and again, I can do a little bit more research on this, but my understanding of it is that they were trying to make large portions of the city multifamily instead of just single family. So, and just very broad brush, not targeted to specific areas close to transit or anything like that. Of course, Webster doesn't have any transit, but it was much more broad brush. And I think that's where I think if anything, there was a lot of misunderstanding about what they were trying to do. So, reading sort of the online conversations isn't necessarily going to get at what they were trying to do. I'm going to wait till after the election to reach out to my friend Laura, who is currently running for mayor. So by the way, if you know any Webster residents, Laura Arnold for mayor. But yeah, I was going to wait till after the election to reach out and try to get coffee with her and get some more perspective on what happened and what they were trying to do is kind of what we're trying to do. Specifically in their case, they don't have a whole lot of places where someone can age in place. They don't have even the amount of duplexes or multifamilies that we have. So if someone who's lived in Webster their entire lives wants to downsize, they have very few choices. So, you know, their intention was to have more options for aging in place, as well as, you know, more options for younger families to move in. So they have a very different problem than we have. And I don't even want to call what we have a problem, you know, it's just, it's a different challenge, I guess.
Seems to me we have a lot of opportunity compared to municipalities around us because of the diversity of our housing stock.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that's another, you know, some of the online conversations that people have been having about how much rental property we have, affordable housing, all of those conversations that, you know, people who don't necessarily understand what's going on in our community. We do have a lot of apartments, but we also have a lot of single family homes that are rentals. So, so we have, by some measure, depending on how recent the data is, more than 50% of our units are actually rentals when you take into account all of the single family homes that are rentals. So again, that, you know, we have that naturally occurring affordable housing that I don't want to lose. I mean, just two houses on my street that have been rental houses for a long, long time, within the last year went up for sale, or a year and a half went up for sale and sold to homeowners, which is great. But, you know, that also means those are off the rental market for someone who was looking for, you know, a smaller 2-bedroom house. So, so it's, yeah, it's that give and take. But, so we're coming up on 6:30, and out of respect for everyone's time, I just wanted to give you guys all kind of the opportunity. Our next meeting is April 11th. Again, it's 4 weeks from tonight, Monday night. Just want to throw this out there in case. I don't know, you know, if we want to continue to meet via Zoom, if that's easiest for everyone, since it is, you know, pretty quick after work, or if anyone is interested in meeting in person at City Hall.
I'm flexible.
Either work for me. I don't mind doing Zoom at all. It just sometimes in-person interaction can be really good if we're getting into like the nitty-gritty of things, but I'm happy to continue to do Zoom.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to be able to have access to our screens while we're working through this.
Yeah.
So that might be an argument for staying on Zoom, unless there's good Wi-Fi at City Hall for us all to bring laptops.
So yeah, I would agree at this point. I think probably staying on Zoom and having, you know, the screens and the Google Doc and all that. I actually have 2 monitors on my computer that's running Zoom, and then I have my own home laptop with the Google Doc on it, since I can't get to it on my work computer. So so yeah, I've got three screens in front of me. But yeah, I think at some point I would like us to all sort of get in person, maybe once we get to that point of kind of having things, you know, all marked up within the Google Doc, and then, you know, maybe hashing through some of the details at that point. And additionally, you know, if we get anyone else from City Hall that may want to join us, or, you know, anyone from planning and zoning that might want to join us, might be a little bit easier if we're all kind of in a room and, you know, maybe have things up on the screen or whatever. But so eventually, yeah, I think I would, but probably not for our next meeting. So for our next meeting, we're all, now that we all have access to the Google Doc, please, go through and make comments, suggestions, take out whole sections if you feel like we need to do that. All of the questions about, is this the right language? Is this the right thing to do? All of those things, I'd say everything's on the table. It's, we all kind of, it sounds like we all have the same intent. And so I think once we get to the point where we've got at least one section where we're comfortable, we'll give that back to Anthony, have him take it to the Plan and Zoning Commission and let them have a look at it, make their comments, and then we'll go from there. But before we close, does anybody else have any comments?
So for next meeting, should we have read all 100-something pages?
If you feel so inclined, yes. But I will say, remember that council has already done the neighborhood business district.
Okay, and that's within the 100-some pages.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, so you can complete. Actually, I think we've done all of the business. I can't remember, to be honest. I know for sure we did neighborhood. But that doesn't mean that, we still can't make improvements to that because, once again, this was a couple of years ago. We were trying to remove some of the antiquated language and things like that. So if you see something in there, please, feel free to comment. I'd say for now, we still kind of focus on the residential since that's going to be the biggest bang for our buck. But yeah, if you're up late one night and you just want to keep going, then by all means. So any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I will see you next month, April 11th, same time, same Zoom, and if not before, in person.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks. Bye.